All right, everyone, if you look at the corporate media right now, supposedly the whole nation is in uproar over the Supreme Court. Oh no, Gorsuch, is he going to get put into place? Are they going to invoke the nuclear option? Blah, blah. McConnell is moving for closure on debating the point, which means, yeah, Gorsuch is going to become the Supreme Court. He's already the nominee, but I mean, he's going to become the next member of the Supreme Court. He will be confirmed. It's virtually certain. They're not going to be able to stand in the way because, like I said, the Republicans can just switch it over so that a simple majority gets him through. It would be kind of unprecedented, but not really. The Democrats actually did this during the Obama era when they wanted to ram through some people Obama wanted in official positions. The Democrats actually did change the Senate rules already, and when that happened years ago, I said there will come a time not too long in the future when that specter is going to hang over the Senate again, only it will be the Republicans that control it, and the Democrats will be trying to filibuster something. I bet they wish that they had listened to sanity and reason at the time so that they wouldn't have set a precedent for this to happen. As far as people saying, oh, well, Garland was denied, well, slightly different situation. The Republicans controlled the Senate at the time. They had the majority in the Senate. They decided it was too close to the twilight of Obama's era for him to get a Supreme Court justice. And they didn't want the balance of the Supreme Court, by the way, to be changed. Here's the problem. As long as you have a partisan Supreme Court, it doesn't really matter what its composition is, now does it? The moderates right now make every decision. You've got certain justices that invariably go far right, certain justices they invariably go far left. That means there's almost inevitably going to be a split decision on anything that actually matters. Unanimous decisions are less common, unless it's something totally innocuous that has nothing to do with anything people find politically relevant. They do think about their relations with popularity in the Supreme Court. They shouldn't, but they do. You know, they're appointed for life to avoid that, but usually in order to sort of preserve this theatrical arrangement of regality around the Supreme Court, they usually try to avoid some of the worst fights. They try to be, unanimous in their decision if something is touchy, and they can possibly do so. But on any combative issue, what you have over and over again are the conservative and liberal justices, ideologically totally non-aligned, and you have one or two moderates swing the vote. It's literally the tyranny of the moderates for those decisions. The fact is, Scalia, who died, creating the vacancy currently on the Supreme Court that needs to be filled, was a conservative justice. Stacking Garland on there to be kind of sort of center-left but kind of a real liberal would have changed the balance of the Supreme Court fundamentally. It would have been a bad thing to happen. And I say this as someone who's not a conservative. I say this as I don't agree with him on certain religious issues. I don't agree with him maybe on abortion, things like that. But perturbing the balance of the Supreme Court, which is actually relatively moderate, all things considered, after sort of the FDR era where he stacks it with 9 liberals so that he can get everything passed all the time. It's actually a pretty moderate Supreme Court right now. The idea that Gorsuch is going to have unwavering control over everything and it'll be a far-right court, if you think that the Supreme Court, when Gorsuch is added, is going to be far-right, you have ideological problems. Just as if Garland had been put there, if you thought that the court would be really far-left, you have ideological issues. You're thinking like a partisan. The fact is that the two moderates on the court control basically everything. It's, I believe, Roberts, Chief Justice, who's kind of labeled a conservative by the Trump fans, but he is sort of a split decision maker. And then I believe the other one's Kennedy, if I remember correctly. He's sort of kind of right on some things, but occasionally goes to the left, and so sometimes the split decision is his. I know on stuff like gay marriage this happens all the time. On things like Obamacare, for example. I believe wasn't it Roberts that switched over to say, well, it's a tax, so it's allowed. And I don't even agree with that decision, but it was the sort of tie-breaking vote there, with all the other justices sort of spoken for on the issue. You've got a tyranny of moderates on SCOTUS right now. Gorsuch isn't going to change that. He's just replacing Scalia. He's about the same level of conservative that Scalia was. So the balance of the court's maintained. All these people saying, oh, if Gorsuch is put in there, Roe v. Wade will fall. They will reconsider abortion. They'll ban it, and gay rights will be banned. Everything will be... Scalia was on the court, or it was pre-Scalia, when those decisions were made. At certain points before that, the court was more conservative. And Roe v. Wade, when Scalia was still alive, didn't get overturned. So how is it going to be different when Gorsuch is there? The Supreme Court can't just sit there like an oligarchic council and make decision after decision. They're waiting until stuff comes to them for consideration. Who's going to launch a serious attack on Roe v. Wade? This issue is decades old. People worried about it being repealed, being stripped back so that abortion becomes outlawed in this country, are literally worrying about nothing with the current composition of the Supreme Court, even with Gorsuch on it. It's not going to happen. That's a little bit of fear porn for the left, probably leading up to the next midterms. They're going to hammer that issue home. Gorsuch, all he has to do is say fetus, and they'll immediately rabble-rouse. That's all he has to do. But it's not going to happen. Gorsuch will be on the Supreme Court. It's now virtually inarguable that happens. It's not going to change the composition of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will function as it did before. In a perfect world, the Supreme Court wouldn't be partisan at all. There wouldn't be such a thing as a liberal justice, a conservative justice, split opinions on touchy issues. Now, there should be one way to interpret the Constitution. It's fairly straightforward. It doesn't really need interpretation. It's there in black and white. You're simply using that to determine whether bills and ideas and stuff at the state or federal level conform to the Constitution. Unfortunately, that's not always what happens. And think about it, the Supreme Court sometimes is the least dysfunctional part of our government. That's sad. Gorsuch being there isn't going to make it better or worse. He's literally Scalia 2.0. Who cares? Scalia was already on the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade, magically it didn't go away. Gay marriage got passed. Wow, yeah, gay marriage became the law of the land federally. Whoa, DOMA fell. Oh, all these things happened while Scalia was on the court. And now they're worried that somehow the court is going to be a collective of extreme far, like literal Nazis or something, because Gorsuch gets put on it. No, the only people there with true power on any touchy issues are the moderates. Gorsuch is not going to have any real power on the Supreme Court. Neither do the far left Justice Ginsburg. She doesn't have any real power in the court. Their only power is occasionally they make some statement to the press or something, and even that's a rarity usually. Ginsburg's like the most outgoing of them all. And when she speaks, sometimes lately she's been speaking off the cuff. She keeps making like a fool of herself when she talks about like Trump or something like that. And even the left didn't defend her on these things. They're like, well, you're a Supreme Court justice, ma'am. You're not really supposed to be weighing in, in an extra judicial sense on like the executive branch. It's not illegal, but it's a breach of decorum. You shouldn't be doing that. Even some of the left didn't like it, and then she apologizes, which is to her benefit, I suppose. Saying this is someone who's ideologically, pretty far removed from Gorsuch or Ginsburg or any of these people. Maybe Kennedy would be the only one that would be ideologically, I would say, sane on the Supreme Court. But Trump, in his first term, he's likely to get another Supreme Court justice. 3 of the justices are now geriatric. Any of them could keel over at any time. Sound money is on Ginsburg, probably being the next one to go. Then you will have a problem. When Ginsburg dies, if she goes within the next 3 years, Trump probably cannot put some far-right individual on the Supreme Court without raising huge amounts of ire. He's going to have to choose another moderate. Which, by the way, again, won't change the composition of the Supreme Court, and he knows this. It won't matter. It's not going to suddenly make the Supreme Court far right or far left or anything else under the sun. Some of his core fans will say, oh, you need Scalia 3.0 now on this court. Ha, fuck the left. Well, that would be a PR disaster. It'd be a political disaster even within his party for certain members. And it wouldn't actually be helpful. It wouldn't help with those split decisions. The moderates would still control the court. He'd need 2 justices to begin overriding the moderates. He's probably not going to get him unless he gets a second term, and he won't get a second term if he starts stacking the court by replacing some far-left justice with somebody who's to the right of Scalia. It's just not sane. It wouldn't be a good idea. He'd have to choose someone who's a moderate, maybe even center-left. Somebody who's comparable to Kennedy or Roberts or something. And that may not be palatable to everyone. It's not going to be palatable to the left no matter what he does. But they'll sit down and shut up if it's a moderate. It won't be palatable to some of his core fans. But again, if it's a moderate, he's not going like, putting another Ginsburg on the court or something. And people are really going to care? No, they'll talk about it for a week and then they'll forget about it. It's a tyranny of the moderates in SCOTUS. That's what we've got in the country today. Gorsuch doesn't change that. He's not going to go after Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court is not going to unilaterally sit there in some council of old white dudes, that the left hates so much, and say, oh, well, abortion is now illegal. Gay marriage is now illegal. Everything is now illegal. Ha, we are a Christian nation. Praise Jesus. We're replacing Trump with a picture of Jesus. Robot Jesus or something like that. Not going to happen. Impossible. Because, again, you've got moderates on the Supreme Court. And if you add up the moderates and the right, you get your 5 votes. And if you add up the moderates and the left, you get your 5 votes. That's what I'm talking about. Simple mathematics. That's about all. Peace out.